This is Palmyra, New Jersey in April of 1990. A quiet community located on the banks of the Delaware River in the southwest corner of Burlington County. Palmyra is a lot like other towns with its residential community, business district, schools, police department, and fire department. There are many things which help a community to flourish and grow, and two things which are generally known to destroy it. The first is crime. To combat crime, the Palmyra Police Department is most capable. The other is fire. The firehouse in Palmyra is located at 115 West Broad Street and houses some of the finest firefighting apparatus found anywhere. We weren't always this well prepared to fight fire. The fire department here was first organized in 1887, some 15 months after a disastrous fire roared up the 500 block of Cinnaminson Avenue, destroying 5 homes and heavily damaging several homes and businesses on Broad Street. Bucket brigades and water-soaked carpet were all that was available to fight this fire. The fire company was originally named the Independence Hook and Ladder Company No. 1 of Riverton and Palmyra. The company protected both communities until Riverton formed their own company in March of 1890. The first Palmyra apparatus, a hand-drawn hook and ladder truck, was purchased from Rumsey Manufacturing in Seneca Falls, New York for $400. It was shipped by rail in October 1887 and was housed in a small shed on Broad Street just west of Delaware Avenue. A large parade and housing ceremony commemorated the event on Thanksgiving Day. This old Palmyra firehouse dates back to 1889. Originally, it was a temporary railroad station erected near Broad Street and Cinnaminson Avenue. After the railroad finished building a permanent railroad station, the fire company bought the temporary station for $75 and moved it to the lot at 215 West Broad Street. The first firehouse shed, located on the same lot, was then moved to Riverton to form the 2nd Brigade of the company. This shed, shown here with a 2nd floor addition, was the first firehouse in Riverton. The 2 pieces of apparatus shown in the station are the hand-drawn hook and ladder truck on the right and a hand-drawn hose wagon on the left. As the community grew, so did its need for fire protection. Innovations were advancing the fire service as years passed, and the men of the Independence Fire Company No. 1 struggled to keep pace with expanding technology. This picture shows the fire company about the turn of the century. Around 1914, the fire company acquired this 1914 Locomobile chemical truck. The truck was chain-driven and was always breaking chains, proving itself unreliable. So in 1918, the company acquired this Packard engine and chassis with its more reliable powertrain, and put the Locomobile body and chemical tank on it, all in the name of progress. In 1923, this Seagrave pumper joined the rank and file. This pumper had an 80-gallon water tank and a 750-gallon per minute pump. 3 years later, the company acquired their 2nd ladder truck, a 1926 city service ladder truck. The truck was equipped with ground ladders only and contained no main aerial device as we are used to seeing today. When the stock market crashed in 1929, economic hardship soon came the way of most communities. Those hard times continued through the 1930s, and it wasn't until 1940 that the company was able to acquire this 1940 Mack pumper. This engine was equipped with a 200-gallon water tank and a 750-gallon per minute pump. This picture shows W. Russell Dilks and Joe Dietz on the corner of Cinnaminson and Henry Street in early 1941. By 1942, this 1941 Ford panel truck had joined the company. The truck was originally a butcher's meat wagon from Medford and was purchased used from Rice and Holman Ford. The truck, containing one of the company's first generators, a DC generator, was used to form the first heavy-duty rescue squad in Palmyra in 1951. Pictured from left to right are Ernest Barkell, Syl Giangiordano, Warren Lamond, Robert Calhoun, Alfred Wells, William Gamble, Roland Wells, Russell Dilks, and Captain Norman Pike. In 1948, with World War II finished, the fire company acquired this 1948 Mack pumper. This truck had a 200-gallon water tank and a 750-gallon per minute pump. When the company was first formed in 1887, the membership purchased fire apparatus through subscriptions collected from residents. Most of the fire apparatus shown in this film was purchased by the borough. Over a span of almost 70 years, the Independence Fire Company No. 1 went from this in 1889 to this in the 1950s. A new 1951 Seagrave 65-foot ladder truck had now joined the company. In 1956, after years of expanding the firehouse to accommodate additional apparatus for an expanding community, the company finally outgrew it. The old A&P just down the street at 115 West Broad Street was purchased, and after an extensive renovation, the company moved in over Memorial Day weekend. Almost 1 year later, fire would hit this town with such ferocity that many residents would never forget it. It would be a year which saw perhaps the two greatest fire disasters in terms of property damage and displacement of people strike the town. The year was 1957. The first fire occurred here at what was then the Penn Jersey Lumber Company, bordered on the north by Madison Street, the east by Market Street, the south by Jefferson Street, and the west by Route 73. The lumberyard occupied almost the entire block. Facing the highway were the main office building, two full-size one-story frame sample houses, and a sample garage. Notice how close the Tacony-Palmyra Bridge Plaza is to this former lumberyard. Backing up to residential properties on Jefferson Street were long corrugated iron one-story sheds. From those sheds, a high wire fence ran the remaining 300 feet down Jefferson Street to Market Street. Inside this fence were very high stacks of finished lumber stored out in the open. On the night of the fire, the weather was fair with a slight breeze blowing from the southeast at 3 miles per hour. Sometime after 3:15 a.m. on the morning of April 16, 1957, the night watchman discovered flames coming from a large pile of lumber in the center of the yard. He then raced to the sales office to telephone for help. Simultaneously, an attendant at the Tacony-Palmyra Bridge also noticed the fire and telephoned the first call to police radio dispatcher George B. Snyder in the Palmyra Police Station. Reaching across the desk, The dispatcher immediately pulled the hook, sounding the borough fire sirens. The time was 3:25 a.m. As firemen ran into the firehouse, they were bathed in light from the flames almost a half-mile away. Firefighters raced to the trucks, knowing now that every second was critical. As Engine 1 started out of the station, Chief Robert Snover immediately requested the Riverton Fire Company No. 1 to respond on the second alarm. He also requested the sirens sounded in Palmyra again. 2 750-gallon-per-minute pumpers, 1 65-foot aerial ladder truck, 1 heavy-duty civil defense rescue truck, and 1 emergency unit were now responding from Palmyra. Riverton had 1 750-gallon-per-minute pumper, 1 600-gallon-per-minute pumper, and a city service ladder truck on the way. Fire Chief Warren Lamond arrived on the fire ground as Engine 1 was stretching into the fire from a hydrant at Front and Market Streets. Critical command decisions were now necessary if the fire was to be stopped. Chief, what were your thoughts when you pulled up?
When I arrived on the scene, my initial size-up indicated that little could be done to save the main buildings, but all efforts would be necessary to protect the exposures. I immediately radioed for additional alarms, bringing out the Riverton Fire Company, 2 companies from Cinnaminson Township, and 2 engines in the 75-foot aerial ladder from Riverside Township, as well as the County Fire Marshal and his assistant. 2 ambulances from the Palmyra Ambulance Association were special called to the scene, as were the second alarmers from Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, for their light truck operations and their canteen unit. I ordered our men of No. 1 pump to play their 2.5-inch line on the Jefferson Street houses as the shingles were smoking. I then had pumper No. 1 stretch another line from the fire to a hydrant on Jefferson Street and Veterans Drive. Pumper No. 2 hooked into the original layout and pumped from a hydrant on a 6-inch main at Market and Front Streets. When our 65-foot aerial ladder truck arrived, I positioned it on the northwest corner of the fire in preparation for ladder pipe operations. While our lines knocked down fires breaking out on the Jefferson Street homes, police and firemen helped to evacuate the entire block.
Mr. Joseph Loper, then 54, lived in a 2-room dwelling behind 623 Jefferson Street. After being awakened by the roar of the flames, he proceeded to rouse 14 occupants of the 6-room dwelling in front of his property. Mr. Loper then watched, along with other residents, as his home was consumed by the flames and the back bedroom, kitchen, and shed of the other house were burned. Many other people were driven out of their homes by the flames, which now attained a height of 50 feet or more. By 4:30 a.m., firefighters had the situation well in hand. However, Chief Lamond ordered an additional alarm sounded to provide relief for his exhausted crews. Additional master streams were also needed on the fire. Relief Engine Company of Morristown District No. 1 responded with 2 750-gallon-per-minute pumpers. Lanola Fire Company of Morristown District No. 2 also sent a pumper. $200,000 damage was the unofficial estimate given for this disaster. Approximately 12,000 feet of 2.5-inch hose and 2,000 feet of 1.5-inch hose were used to fight this fire, with firefighters sustaining only 4 minor injuries. Stanton Cherry, however, collapsed from exhaustion and was treated at the scene by borough physician Dr. Dean H. Lefevre. Stanton and Bernard Cherry were owners of the now destroyed Penn Jersey Lumber Company. Firefighters remained on scene after sunrise, pouring water on the smoldering embers. It was, however, several hours later before this fire was finally declared out. A critique of this fire shows that 1. Firefighters were greeted with a massive volume of fire upon arrival. 2. The first hose lines were strategically placed, and these lines were instrumental in saving homes on Jefferson Street. 3. Area residents were safely evacuated with no loss of life and no injuries. And finally, the rapid sounding of additional alarms and the quick work of firefighters were critical in stopping this near conflagration. With the memory of this fire still fresh in the minds of firefighters, just 8 short months later, a second disastrous fire would strike the town. This time it would involve the Palmyra High School. Shortly before 4 a.m. on the rainy Monday morning of December 9th, 1957, John Kern, a nearby resident, awoke to the smell of smoke. As he looked out his bedroom window in the direction of the high school, he saw flames shooting into the night sky. He telephoned police headquarters reporting what he thought was a house on fire across from the high school. The dispatcher sounded the borough fire sirens and immediately dispatched Police Sergeant Peyton Flournoy to the scene. Arriving at the high school, Sergeant Flournoy discovered heavy fire coming from a second-floor window on the 4th Street side of the building and heavy smoke rolling through the 3rd floor. For a time prior to this alarm, Sergeant Flournoy had searched the area in vain, trying to locate a smell of smoke. The source of that smoke was now plainly evident. As firefighters began arriving at the firehouse, the odor of burning wood captured their senses. Men raced for the trucks, pulling boot tops to thigh and preparing for the inferno they knew was waiting. Engine 1, now manned and ready, raced to the fire, followed closely by Engine 2, the ladder and rescue trucks. By now, the 3rd floor was heavily involved in fire, and flames were already tearing through the roof. Warren Lamont, Palmyra Fire Chief, arriving on the heels of first-in firefighters, made this assessment.
When I arrived on the scene, it was apparent that one wing, the north wing, was well involved, and that additional men and fire apparatus would be necessary if we were going to save the rest of the school. I ordered additional alarms struck, which brought the Riverton Fire Company, the Delaware and Perry Fire Companies from Cinnaminson Township. With these companies on the way, I ordered Dellaview of Delaire, Riverside, Maple Shade, and Burlington City Fire Companies dispatched to the scene. Many of these companies knew just where to take up stations to fight the blaze, as a cooperative drill was held on this exposure the past October. I also requested 2 units of the Palmyra Ambulance Association, a canteen unit from Morristown, and the 2nd Alarmers of Willow Grove, Pennsylvania to respond. In hopes of saving the rest of the building, I ordered 2.5-inch lines on all floors and the roof to make a fire stop. This operation was successful as just the north wing was destroyed.
This was something Chief Lamont would later call a human firewall comprised of 2.5-inch hose and guts. The initial attack on the fire was hampered by a chain-link fence around the school and a number of locked gates. These gates were soon unlocked by the school custodian, who arrived shortly after the fire was discovered. Hose lines were laid to many area hydrants, and a tunnel had to be dug under the Pennsylvania Railroad tracks in order to utilize the hydrant at Broad and Chestnut Streets. Around 5:15 a.m., there was a thunderous roar and a shower of sparks as the roof, third, second, and first floors of the school collapsed into the basement. Shortly thereafter, a steel rain gutter near the roof level of the school crashed to the ground, causing firemen to run for cover. 2 firefighters from Maple Shade were injured fighting the blaze. Jack Pollock was struck on the hip by a flying hose as it burst, and Joseph Johnstone was hit in the abdomen by a blast of water. Both men were treated at the scene and taken home by ambulance. Acetylene torches were used at one point to remove a section of fence so Burlington's ladder truck could be placed near the building. Several hours later, several more sections of fence were removed. Now mired in mud and in the shadow of weakened walls, it was deemed urgent to remove the truck. Frank's Towing on Route 73 was successful in pulling the truck to safety. As the sun rose over the firefighters that morning, the extent of the damage became fully evident. Several members of the school board, many of whom had been watching the fire since the first alarm sounded, now started planning their next move. The fire destroyed 15 of 33 classrooms in the junior high school end of the building. The school library and a study hall were also destroyed. In addition, 2 or 3 classrooms in the adjacent section of the school had no ceilings, and several others were damaged by smoke and water. School officials and neighbors, assisted by firemen, entered the school that morning and removed the valuable office records. Salvage covers were also placed over the switchboard and several pieces of office furniture to prevent water damage. Morristown, Riverside, Pennsauken, Burlington, Cinnaminson, and Haddon Township Boards of Education all offered aid in one form or another, including classroom space. Palmyra Junior Women's Club, Palmyra Masonic Order, Christ Church of Riverton, Palmyra PTA, Palmyra Home Supply, the American Legion, Epworth Methodist Church, Triborough Chamber of Commerce, and a number of fire companies also offered assistance. In the week that followed the fire, school was canceled while the school board and contractors worked feverishly to put the remaining partially damaged section of the school into usable condition. School opened the following week to a schedule of split sessions held in the remaining portion of the high school. Sophomores, juniors, and seniors went to morning session, which started prior to sunrise and lasted until about 12:30 p.m. 7th, 8th, and 9th grade had the afternoon session starting about 1 p.m. and finishing around 6 p.m. The destroyed section of the high school was torn down almost immediately. Construction started in 1958 on a new wing. The split sessions continued for over a year and a half until construction was complete. The fire, which started in a house on this property at 5th and Cinnaminson Avenue in May of 1886, was determined to be arson. The dwelling was a new and unoccupied 3-story double frame dwelling similar to this dwelling. When the fire was discovered, first witnesses reported seeing fire blowing out of the basement and second floor at the same time, indicating 2 separate fires. The arsonist set this fire on a very windy day and came very close to destroying the town. No arrests were ever made in this case. The lumberyard fire started in a pile of lumber in the center of the yard, away from electric and other sources of ignition. Suspects were established, but like the fire of 1886, no arrests were made. The arsonist successfully displaced a number of families and destroyed a profitable business. Again, this fire could have destroyed the town had it not been for the efforts of the fire department. The embers were still smoldering at the high school as police initiated a massive investigation. Heading the investigation were Police Chief Joseph H. Rogers and County Detective Harry McConnell. Before the day was over that Monday, December 9th, 1957, 2 suspects had confessed and were in custody. 2 local students reportedly admitted entering the school unlawfully for the purpose of finding future test papers. During their search, paper torches were allegedly used, some of which apparently caused the destructive fire. Letters of commendation were awarded to Police Chief Joseph H. Rogers, Police Officers Barry Bowman and William Gamble, and Fire Chief Warren Lamond for their contributions to the investigation. Arson is a crime that affects us all, as this film plainly illustrates. Those who commit arson sometimes pay for their crimes. However, more times than not, the arsonist isn't caught and no one pays, except the victims. Most fires are not as spectacular as the lumberyard or school fires, but smaller fires are equally devastating to the people they touch. House fires result in billions of dollars in property losses every year. Even more tragic is the fact that thousands of people are severely burned and disfigured by fire each year. We, the members of the Independence Fire Company No. 1, urge you to continually practice fire safety.